So, Vanguard is very soon, and I initially wasn't going to talk about this thought I've had at all. Mostly out of fear of being really wrong and looking really stupid, but I've decided I should at least put this out there in stride, even if I'm hilariously wrong, because I just think there's something going on with Syraxis. I just cannot shake the feeling that there is a more familiar connection to this new character underneath, and you'll soon see why. I mean, a theory can't be that stupid if you can reasonably back it up, right? Those of you who saw my ramblings on Twitter probably know that I am a little obsessed with the fact that Syraxis' design and title have specific connections that are very familiar. Extremely familiar, even. I'll start with her design because it will become very clear very fast what my idea is after going over some background. Syraxis and her three faces are very reminiscent of Hecate, a Greek goddess with many different associations. But before we get to that, the significance of the three phases themselves are that they can be representative of three phases. The most common reading is that Hecate's three faces are as follows. One represents purity, like that of a maiden, another is that of a maternal and protective figure, and the last is a darker and more wicked form. These specific readings come from various historical depictions that have since been merged in more recent times. However, the common idea that prevails over the more nuanced ones is that Hecate is a wicked goddess of dark magic, specifically necromancy. An interesting note on the protective aspect is that Hecate was invoked as a protector against spirits or entities, but could actively choose to not protect or even invite these entities upon people at her whims. With both of these aspects, it sounds a lot like how they described Syraxis, so I'd wager that darker and more sinister reading is the one being leaned into for Vanguard. Hecate is also associated with boundaries and crossroads. She's particularly thought of as being a liminal goddess, with a focus on being between realms. This eventually morphed into her being thought of as a goddess of the underworld. That's where her association with magic morphed into that of necromancy in particular, which is the more common interpretation today. As we approach the end of the associations that I think are of most importance, it cannot be ignored that Hecate was associated with the moon as well, specifically the new moon. And this is where I started to get suspicious because all of these points are extremely specific. But I didn't really connect the dots until I read a passage about Hecate and her association with dogs in particular. Her arrival was said to be marked by the howling of hounds, who were her sacred animal. So, I want to propose the idea that Syraxis has some connection to, or even is, Samantha Maxis. I hesitate to say they're the same though, as it feels a bit silly at this point in time and would make things incredibly complicated, as I'll discuss later, but there has to be a connection of some kind, at the very least. Take Syraxis' title as well, the Shadow. Very funny that Samantha is the one who has been most associated with shadows since the very early days, and also shares the Hecate associations of necromancy, dogs as a sacred animal, and even boundaries. She technically is between worlds with both the events of Tog and her re-entering the Dark Ether. That in and of itself actually encapsulates three phases of herself as well. One phase of herself in Ether, the other in the New Universe, and the third being a more accepted state in the Dark Ether once again. That would be kind of fascinating if that is the direction this is to go in. And of course, there's the whole thing with her and choosing to be a protector or a force of destruction. It all aligns very well. Hell, even the name, Syraxis, that's a lot of familiar letters put together too. No way is this an accident, and it's been driving me mental for weeks. Because I'm torn between thinking this is meaningful and thinking I'm being ridiculous because it simultaneously feels like a reach, even with all this information. Bringing this back to Earth a little, I think it could be that Syraxis is where Samantha's power derives from, perhaps. And I propose that because I am not quite sure about how I feel of the possibility of Samantha being Syraxis, as I worry that would just lead to some time shenanigans. Especially with the knowledge that the Forsaken just kills and absorbs the other Elder Gods in Dark Ether. Like, unless Vanguard is to pull a gotcha retcon with that idea, I just don't see it completely working out as a long-term plot point. So I think a simple connection is more probable than that as a take, until proven otherwise. Overall, I find it hard to tear away from the idea of this connection being important in some way. And I think this is a good place to conclude my deranged whiteboard moment pre-Vanguard launch. I look forward to seeing what happens and if any of this truly means anything. Or if I've just overanalyzed once again and this is all a complete coincidence, which I just don't think it is. I don't think this is a coincidence. But in any case, thank you for watching.